There's a moment every dog owner dreads, that single heartbeat when your best friend stops breathing and the world goes silent. That's exactly what happened in a crowded park one sunny morning. Until a German shepherd named Echo did something no one expected. He didn't just save a little girl's life. He uncovered a truth that would break and then heal an entire family. This isn't just a story about a hero dog. It's about the kind of loyalty that sees through fear, the kind of love that refuses to give up, even when humans fail each other. I've spent years telling real stories like this, stories that remind us why we call dogs our partners, not our pets. And what you're about to see isn't a fairy tale. It's proof that sometimes instincts are wiser than reason. So if you've ever loved a dog, really loved one, stay with me. Because by the end of this story, you won't just believe in Echo. You'll see your own dog differently. The morning unfolded like a painting. The first light of spring draped over Riverside Park, tinting the grass in hues of gold and green. Joggers moved rhythmically along the trail, the air filled with laughter, distant music, and the rhythmic splash of a fountain nearby. Children squealed as kites climbed the sky, their ribbons fluttering like living rainbows. Everything felt whole, alive. The kind of morning that made strangers smile at each other for no reason at all. Among the crowd walked Officer Daniel Ross, his uniform neat, his expression calm but observant. The badge on his chest caught glints of sunlight, but his gaze often drifted to the German shepherd pacing proudly beside him. "Stay close, Echo," Daniel murmured. Echo responded with a flick of his tail and that subtle alertness only a trained K9 could have. Ears tilted, eyes sharp, every muscle quietly aware of the world around him. At 6 years old, Echo had seen more than most people could bear. Rescues in collapsed buildings, drug busts gone wrong, nights when sirens painted the city in blue and red chaos. Yet here, under the spring light, he almost looked like a regular dog enjoying the peace he rarely found on duty. Daniel threw a frisbee across the open field. Echo darted after it, a streak of strength and grace catching it mid-air before circling back, tail wagging in victory. A few children clapped from the playground nearby. One of them, a little girl holding a pink balloon, gasped in delight. "Mommy, look! The police dog!" she squealed. Her mother smiled softly. Emily Thompson, mid-20s, wore a light blue dress and carried the kind of fragile beauty that seemed to belong to old photographs. Tired eyes but gentle movements. She held her daughter's hand as the little one tugged forward. "Hi, puppy," said the girl. "What's his name?" Daniel chuckled as he clipped the leash back. "His name's Echo. He's not really a puppy anymore, but I think he'd like you." The girl grinned, holding out her tiny hand. Echo sniffed her fingers politely before licking them once, as if sealing a quiet friendship. "I'm Lily," she announced proudly, "and this is Mr. Balloon." Daniel crouched to Lily's level, smiling. "Nice to meet both of you, Lily and Mr. Balloon." Emily laughed softly, a sound light as wind through glass. "She's been talking about balloons all morning," she said. "You've made her day." "Glad to hear it," Daniel replied, feeling that rare ease he seldom allowed himself. Echo sat obediently beside him, eyes following Lily's balloon drifting lazily above her. For a moment, everything was still perfect. Too perfect. Then, the sound came. A short, sharp gasp. Then a scream that tore through the morning like breaking glass. "Lily! Lily, no!" Daniel's head snapped around. Emily was on her knees, clutching her daughter's limp body against her chest. The pink balloon slipped from Lily's hand, floating upward into the blinding sun. The laughter from the park vanished into stunned silence. "Somebody help!" Emily's voice cracked, desperate. "She's not breathing!" Daniel's instincts ignited before thought could form. "Echo, heal!" he commanded, running toward them. People stepped aside, their faces pale. The world seemed to move in slow motion. The thud of Daniel's boots, the ragged sobs of the mother, the stillness of the child. Lily's head lolled against Emily's arm, her lips faintly blue, chest unmoving. Daniel knelt beside them, his training taking over. "Ma'am, I need you to set her down." Emily hesitated, clutching the girl tighter. "Please, she's—" "Trust me," Daniel said firmly. His tone left no space for doubt. Trembling, Emily laid Lily on the grass, but before Daniel could begin, Echo moved. The dog lowered his head, sniffing rapidly along Lily's face and chest, then pressing his nose against her sternum. His body tensed. A short, sharp bark erupted, one single signal, the one Daniel had trained him for. Cardiac distress. Daniel's pulse spiked. "Okay, buddy. Got it." He unbuttoned his sleeves, placed his hands on Lily's chest, and began compressions. The sound of his gloves against her small body echoed faintly against the silence of the crowd. 1, 2, 3. Emily sobbed uncontrollably, her hands trembling over her mouth. "Please, baby, please." Daniel's voice stayed steady even as sweat gathered at his temple. "Stay with me, Lily. Come on, sweetheart." Echo circled once, whining low, then pressed his nose back near her mouth, as if urging Daniel on, as if counting with him. Seconds stretched like hours. Daniel breathed for her, compressions steady, mechanical, refusing to falter. The world narrowed to the fragile rise and fall that refused to come. Then, just as his strength began to falter, a flicker, a soft, rasping cough. Daniel froze. Then another cough. Lily's chest lifted, a shallow, jerky inhale. "She's breathing," he whispered, barely audible. Then louder. "She's breathing!" A wave of gasps and cries rolled through the crowd. Someone began clapping through tears. Emily collapsed forward, hugging her daughter and sobbing so violently her shoulders shook. "Thank you. Oh God, thank you," she cried. Daniel exhaled, chest heaving, adrenaline still racing. He reached to check Lily's pulse, weak but steady. Relief flooded through him like sunlight breaking storm clouds. But while everyone else wept or cheered, Echo did not move. He stood rigid beside them, tail still, nose twitching faintly as he sniffed the air around Emily. Then slowly, his gaze rose to her face and held. Daniel caught it out of the corner of his eye. "Easy, boy," he murmured, thinking Echo was just overstimulated. Yet something in Echo's stare unsettled him. Not aggression, not confusion. Something closer to warning. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Paramedics pushed through the crowd, taking over with efficient urgency. Daniel stepped back, guiding Echo to heal, watching as Emily clung to her daughter, whispering broken prayers of gratitude. The pink balloon was gone now. Just a dot in the far blue, swallowed by sunlight. Echo gave a final sniff toward the air, then turned to Daniel. Their eyes met, and in that instant, through instinct deeper than language, Daniel knew Echo was trying to tell him something. Something wasn't right. Echo's ears flattened, and with a sudden piercing bark, sharper than before, he gave the signal once more, the sound cutting clean through the chaos. This time, it wasn't for the child. It was for the truth that neither of them yet understood. The sirens were still minutes away when Daniel dropped to his knees beside the child. His breath came fast, the world narrowing into one single focus: keep her alive. Echo was already there, nose pressed to Lily's chest, issuing short, deliberate barks in rhythm, as if urging Daniel to follow. "Good boy, Echo, stay with me," Daniel muttered, his voice low but steady. He interlaced his fingers, positioned them carefully at the center of Lily's tiny sternum, and began compressions. 1, 2, 3. Each push firm but measured, his training taking over even as adrenaline clawed through his veins. The little girl's chest barely moved. Her head rolled slightly to the side, curls spilling across her pale cheek. "Come on, sweetheart. Breathe for me," Daniel whispered through gritted teeth. Echo circled tightly beside him, whining, pawing at the ground, then pressing his nose back toward Lily's mouth. His body trembled with urgency, not panic, but a desperate, almost human intensity. Every bark, every nudge was perfectly timed to Daniel's rhythm, as though the two had done this dance 100 times before. Emily knelt opposite, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Her voice cracked as she pleaded through tears. "Please, please don't take her. Please, God. She's all I have." Her sobs grew louder, spilling over into the kind of anguish that made bystanders cover their mouths in helpless empathy. A man nearby tried to dial 911 again, his own voice trembling. Daniel counted under his breath. 15. 16. He leaned down, sealed his lips over Lily's tiny mouth, and breathed life into her lungs. Once, twice. Nothing. His heart thudded painfully. "Come on, baby girl, come on!" Then, faintly, a twitch, a flutter of her eyelids. He froze, leaning closer. A weak cough rattled through her throat, followed by a tiny, gasping whimper. Daniel exhaled shakily. "There you go. That's it. That's it." Echo barked once, sharp, joyous, and nudged her cheek gently with his nose. Lily's chest began to rise and fall again, uneven, but alive. For a moment, no one moved. The entire park seemed to hold its breath. Then, like a dam breaking, sound flooded back. Cries, cheers, clapping. Strangers hugged each other, tears shining in their eyes. Emily's hands flew to her mouth. She let out a sob that broke mid-breath, then fell forward, wrapping her daughter in trembling arms. "Oh my God! Lily, baby, can you hear me? You're okay, you're okay." Daniel leaned back on his heels, sweat beading across his forehead. He watched as the color slowly returned to the child's face, soft pink replacing the terrifying pallor. Echo sat beside him now, chest heaving, gaze fixed not on the crowd, not even on Lily, but on Emily. The German shepherd's head tilted slightly, ears stiff. His nostrils flared, sniffing the air around her like he was chasing a scent invisible to human senses. Daniel noticed. He frowned, reaching to calm his partner. "It's okay, boy. She's fine now. You did good." But Echo didn't relax. His tail stayed low, his gaze unblinking. He shifted his weight, letting out a low rumble, not aggression, not fear, but suspicion. Emily rocked her daughter back and forth, whispering over and over, "You're safe. Mommy's here." Her tears soaked into Lily's hair. The wail of the approaching ambulance grew louder, slicing through the background chatter. Daniel stood slowly, signaling to a paramedic who was running toward them. "Over here!" She's breathing again, weak pulse, unresponsive for about 2 minutes. They moved quickly, transferring Lily to a stretcher with practiced hands. Oxygen mask, pulse check, gentle reassurance. Daniel stepped aside, his heartbeat still drumming hard against his ribs. "Sir," one of the EMTs said, glancing up, "you did everything right. You and your dog probably saved her life. Daniel nodded, his throat tight. He knew before I did, he said softly, looking down at Echo. The paramedic smiled. That's one hell of a partner. As they lifted Lily into the ambulance, Emily reached out, clutching Daniel's arm. You saved her. You saved my baby. Her words came out broken, trembling with gratitude and shock. Daniel didn't know what to say. Just doing my job, he murmured. Echo deserves the credit. Emily turned to the dog, tears spilling fresh. Thank you, boy. Thank you. Echo blinked, unmoving. His gaze met hers, deep, golden, unreadable. He lowered his head but didn't wag his tail. His nose twitched once more. Then he looked away toward the ambulance, ears pulled back slightly. Daniel noticed again the tension, the discomfort, but brushed it off. He figured Echo was overstimulated after the intensity of the rescue. Still, a sliver of unease dug beneath his composure. He'd worked with Echo long enough to trust that every move, every reaction, had meaning. And right now, Echo was uneasy, not from exhaustion, but from something else. The ambulance doors closed with a metallic clang. Emily climbed in beside her daughter, holding her hand, still sobbing softly. As the siren wailed and the vehicle sped away, Daniel exhaled slowly. The crowd began to disperse. Some people stayed behind, whispering, still shaken. One older woman approached Daniel, tears streaking her face. You and that dog. You're angels, she said, voice trembling. Daniel smiled faintly. He's the angel, ma'am. I just follow his lead. When she left, the park fell quiet again. The sunlight that once felt warm now seemed too bright. Echo sat at Daniel's side, panting softly, eyes still fixed on the direction the ambulance had gone. His fur bristled just slightly along the neck. Daniel crouched beside him, resting a hand on his head. You okay, buddy? Echo didn't answer. Of course. But his body was tense, alert, as though listening to a sound Daniel couldn't hear. The officer looked out over the park, at the trampled grass, the forgotten picnic blanket, the pink balloon string tangled in the branches above, and felt the echo of chaos still hanging in the air. It had been a miracle, a child brought back from the brink of death. The kind of story people would remember, retell, share online with hashtags and heart emojis. But Echo's stillness unsettled him. The dog turned, nose twitching again, and stared at Daniel with eyes that seemed to speak. There was something else. A question. A warning. Hidden in that gaze. Daniel exhaled. We'll figure it out, partner, he murmured, though he didn't know what it was. Echo blinked once, slowly. His tail moved just enough to touch Daniel's boot. A silent acknowledgement of trust, or perhaps a reminder. As they walked back toward the patrol car, the faint sound of the siren still echoed through the distance, fading under the hum of the city. Daniel looked once more toward the sky. The balloon was gone, but the image of that small hand letting it slip lingered in his mind, as if innocence itself had floated away, too light to hold on to. And somewhere deep inside, though he didn't understand it yet, Daniel knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far more complicated, something that Echo, with his unshakable instincts, had already sensed. The world saw a level moderate miracle. Echo saw a mystery, and Daniel Ross, whether he was ready or not, was standing in the middle of both. By sunrise the next morning, Riverside Park was no longer just a park. It had become a symbol, the stage of a miracle. The story spread like wildfire. The video, shaky, grainy, filmed on someone's phone, showed Echo darting toward a child, Daniel Ross following close behind, the mother screaming, and then, that impossible moment when the little girl coughed and came back to life. Within hours, it was everywhere. On TV, on social media, on the front page of every local paper. "The hero dog who saved a child," one headline read. "Angel with a badge, meet Officer Echo." People who'd never even heard of Riverside Park before now wept watching the clip. Daniel sat in the precinct break room, the low hum of morning chatter all around. The screen above the coffee machine was replaying the rescue for the 10th time in an hour. His own face filled the frame, kneeling in uniform, performing CPR, while Echo's dark coat gleamed under sunlight, nose pressed against the child's chest. The news anchor's voice floated over the scene, soft and reverent. In an extraordinary act of instinct and courage, a German shepherd named Echo and his handler, Officer Daniel Ross, saved 4-year-old Lily Thompson from the brink of death. Applause erupted from a nearby table. "You're famous, Ross," someone shouted. "Your dog's got more fans than the Yankees right now." Daniel smiled faintly, rubbing a hand through his hair. He always was the star of the team. Across the room, a younger officer scrolled through his phone. "Dude, look at this. #, Echo. The hero is trending. Someone made a fan page. Already 500,000 followers. 500,000. Time 300 pounds zone." The number felt unreal. Echo sat by Daniel's feet, resting calmly, though his ears twitched at every sound. The dog's composure never fooled Daniel. He knew the little movements that betrayed unease. Every time Emily Thompson's face appeared on the screen, pale, tearful, holding her daughter's hand for reporters, Echo's head would lift, his tail going still. And there she was again now. The TV cut to an interview outside St. Mary's Hospital. Emily stood before the cameras, her voice trembling. "I thought I'd lost her. But then that dog, Echo, he came out of nowhere. It's like he knew exactly what to do. I owe them everything." Her eyes glistened, her tone soft, broken, perfectly sympathetic. She squeezed Lily's small hand, the little girl shy and quiet under the flashes of a dozen cameras. Everyone watching melted, except Echo. A low sound escaped his throat. Not a growl, more like a warning rumble. Daniel glanced down sharply. "Easy, buddy. It's just the TV." But the dog's eyes stayed fixed on Emily, his nostrils twitching, pupils narrowing. Then, abruptly, he turned his head away, resting his chin on his paws, as if refusing to watch. Daniel frowned. "What's wrong with you, huh?" he whispered. But Echo didn't answer. "Ross," came a deep voice from the doorway. Captain Harris, broad-shouldered and gray-templed, motioned him over. "In my office. Bring your partner." Daniel followed, Echo at his side. Inside, the captain's desk was buried under papers and half-drunk coffee cups. The computer monitor showed a live feed from the morning show. Good Morning America wanted an interview. Harris leaned back in his chair, a grin tugging at his mouth. "You realize you two just made the department look like heroes, right? We've been drowning in bad press for months, and now everyone's in love with a dog." Daniel shifted awkwardly. "We just got lucky, sir." "Luck? Nah, that was skill and instinct. And the internet eats that up." Harris tapped his screen. "You're doing a press circuit this week. Local stations first, then maybe national. The chief's office already approved it." Daniel blinked. "Sir, I'm not really—" "It's not a request, son. You and Echo are the department's golden boys now." Harris leaned forward, lowering his voice. And between you and me, we could use it. The public needs to see compassion in uniform again. You've got that in spades." Daniel nodded, though unease rippled beneath his pride. "Understood." As they left the office, he reached down to pat Echo's shoulder. "You hear that? We're celebrities now." Echo glanced up at him with tired eyes, tail giving a single, slow wag. Outside, the precinct lobby buzzed with reporters and flashing cameras. A few children stood near the entrance, holding hand-drawn posters. "Thank you, Echo," with hearts and paw prints scribbled in marker. Echo sat patiently as Daniel guided him through, allowing the kids to pet his fur. He smiled for the cameras, but every lens pointed at him felt heavy. Hero, savior, miracle. The words clung like badges he hadn't asked for. Later that night, Daniel sat alone in his small apartment, the TV still glowing. Echo lay near the couch, head resting on his paws. The sound of another broadcast filled the silence. This time, the story wasn't about Echo. It was about Mark Thompson, Lily's father. Authorities have confirmed that the child's father, Mark Thompson, is being questioned as part of a child neglect investigation. The footage showed Mark outside his house, a tall, weary man with hollow eyes, surrounded by microphones. "I'd never hurt my daughter," he said, voice breaking. "Whatever people think, I love her. She's everything to me." Daniel watched in silence. He didn't know Mark personally, but something in the man's expression, raw, devastated, didn't look like guilt. Echo lifted his head, ears pricking. The dog stared at the screen again, but not at Mark. At Emily, appearing briefly in a cutaway shot. Her face was calm, composed, almost too controlled. Echo's lip twitched, revealing a flash of teeth. A soft, uneasy growl rose from his chest. Daniel muted the volume. "What is it, boy?" Echo turned his gaze toward him, then to the door, then back again, restless, alert. Daniel sighed, rubbing his eyes. "You saved that girl's life. You should be sleeping, not worrying about the news." But even as he said it, he couldn't shake the same unease gnawing at his gut. Emily Thompson was being painted as a brave mother who'd survived every parent's worst nightmare. The world adored her. Yet every time her face appeared on screen, Echo's instincts said something different, something cold, unseen, impossible to name. Daniel leaned back, staring at the darkened ceiling. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of city traffic outside. Everything felt distant. Echo finally rose and padded to the window, sitting upright, eyes scanning the street below. The city lights reflected in his amber eyes, glowing like fire in the dark. Daniel watched him for a long time. "You think this story's not over, don't you?" he murmured. Echo didn't move, didn't even blink. The city buzzed on, unaware that beneath the viral headlines and the cheering crowds, something far more complicated was beginning to stir. And though the world saw Echo as a hero, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that his partner had already moved past the celebration. Echo wasn't basking in fame. He was tracking something unseen, something that, one day soon, the whole world would wish it had, noticed sooner. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sirens echoing somewhere beyond the city blocks. Moonlight filtered through the blinds, striping the living room in cold silver lines. Daniel Ross stirred in his sleep, one arm draped over the edge of the couch. Echo lay near his boots, his usual post, chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. It had been a long week of interviews, lights, microphones, and endless praise. Everyone called them heroes. Everyone wanted their story. But in the quiet, Echo wasn't resting. A soft whimper escaped him, low, tremulous, His paws twitched, claws scratching faintly against the floor. His tail jerked once, twice. Then his breathing changed, shallow, urgent. Daniel woke instantly. He sat up, disoriented, eyes adjusting to the dimness. Echo! The dog whimpered again, louder this time, a sound full of distress, not pain, but memory. Daniel knelt beside him. Echo's muscles were rigid, eyes fluttering beneath closed lids. Hey, wake up, buddy. He laid a hand on the dog's shoulder. Echo jolted awake, eyes wide, ears pinned back. He scrambled to his feet, pacing in a tight circle, his nose lowered to the floor, sniffing, tracking something unseen, invisible. Easy, Daniel said softly. You're home. It's okay. But Echo didn't calm. He sniffed along the wall, the corners, the air. Tail stiff, movements sharp. His breathing grew quick, restless. Then he stopped near the window, nose pressed to the glass, staring into the night. Daniel followed his gaze. Nothing outside but the soft glow of streetlights and the rustling of trees. Still, the dog's body trembled. Still seeing the park? Daniel murmured. Still hearing her cry? He crouched next to him again, hand steady on the dog's fur. You saved her, Echo. It's over now. But something inside Daniel tightened as he said it, because even in daylight, he'd caught the same tension in Echo's body, the same focus, the same scent-driven obsession that usually meant danger wasn't over. When Echo finally lay down again, Daniel couldn't sleep. He poured himself a glass of water and turned on his laptop. The rescue video, the one that had gone viral, was still open in one of the tabs. He hesitated, then hit play. The shaky footage filled the screen. The chaos of the crowd, Emily's cries, Daniel's own voice shouting instructions. But this time, he didn't watch himself. He watched Echo. Frame by frame, he slowed the playback. Echo racing forward, but not directly to Lily. First, he veered toward Emily's left side, sniffing her jacket. Then toward the girl's chest. His movements were purposeful, precise. He wasn't scanning for airways. He was tracking a scent. Daniel leaned closer. Echo's nose hovered for several seconds over Lily's shirt, then her mouth, then her chest, as if following something layered, chemical. He replayed it again. Again. Not breath, Daniel whispered. You weren't smelling for life. You were smelling for something else. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The room suddenly felt smaller, tighter. The next morning, the precinct called, a request from the hospital for a visit. Lily was recovering quickly and wanted to see Echo again. The request brought a brief smile to Daniel's face. For all his doubts, he couldn't say no to that little girl. They arrived at St. Mary's Hospital just before noon. Echo trotted beside him, tail gently wagging, his vest polished clean, the image of a hero. Nurses smiled as they passed, whispers trailing behind them. That's the dog. That's Echo. When they entered Lily's room, the little girl's face lit up instantly. Echo! She cried, voice still hoarse but full of life. Daniel smiled. Hey there, champ. Look who came to visit. Lily stretched out her arms as Echo padded forward, lowering his head so she could touch him. She giggled as his wet nose brushed her cheek. Mommy, he remembers me, she said, laughing. Emily sat by the bedside, her smile gentle but her eyes rimmed red. Of course he does, sweetheart. He's your guardian angel. For a moment it felt almost normal, warmth, gratitude, the fragile peace after a storm. But then, Echo froze. His body went rigid, nose lifted, ears pricked. Daniel noticed immediately. What is it? He murmured. Echo's gaze shifted, Not to Lily, not to the machines, not to the doctors, but to Emily's handbag, sitting on the small table beside the bed. The dog lowered his head, nostrils flaring. A soft, uneasy growl rolled from his chest. Emily blinked, startled. What's wrong? Daniel's stomach knotted. Echo, no, he said quietly, tugging the leash back. But Echo didn't budge. He stared at the bag, his entire frame tense, not aggressive, but wary, like he'd found something out of place. Lily frowned, eyes wide. Is he mad? Daniel forced a smile. No, sweetie, just curious. But his pulse was racing. He couldn't ignore that sound. That low, controlled growl Echo only used when something wasn't right. Emily reached for the bag quickly, pulling it closer to her lap. It's just my purse, she said, her voice a touch too quick, too defensive. Echo's ears twitched. He let out one final huff, then sat down, gaze locked on her as if memorizing her scent. Daniel felt the tension between them like static in the air. After a long, silent moment, he cleared his throat. He's fine now, probably just reacting to the smell of medicine or hospital sanitizer. Emily's smile was forced. Right. That must be it. But Echo didn't look away until Daniel gently tugged his collar. They left shortly after. Lily waved from her bed, her laughter echoing faintly down the hallway. But as they walked out, Daniel couldn't shake the heaviness settling in his gut. Outside, he crouched beside Echo. You've been acting strange since that day, he whispered. You knew something in the park. And now this. Echo's amber eyes met his. Steady. Intense. Daniel sighed. What are you trying to tell me, partner? The dog blinked once, slow and deliberate. Then he turned his head toward the hospital door, toward where Emily still sat inside, and gave one short, quiet bark. It wasn't loud, but the meaning hit Daniel like a punch, a signal, a warning. He stared after the sound, the question forming but unspoken. What if the story everyone believes, the miracle they celebrated, isn't what it seems? Echo stood perfectly still, tail low, eyes never leaving the door. And Daniel Ross, for the first time since the rescue, felt something colder than fear settle deep in his chest. Doubt. The rain fell in a steady rhythm against the precinct windows, tracing crooked silver lines down the glass. Inside, Officer Daniel Ross sat at his desk long after most of the team had gone home. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the clock ticking past midnight. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. Echo lay curled at his feet, silent but awake, always awake. Every time thunder rumbled outside, the dog's ears flicked, but his gaze never left Daniel. It was as though he could sense what his handler was about to do, and in some quiet way, was already bracing for it. On the desk lay a sealed evidence bag. Inside, a small fabric sample, a torn piece from Lily Thompson's t-shirt collected the day of the rescue. Daniel had found it when the department's storage officer handed him the leftover items from the hero case for press documentation. Most people would have seen it as a sentimental artifact. But Daniel had seen something else. When he'd opened the bag earlier, just for a moment, Echo had stiffened, his nostrils flared. Then came that sound, a low, uncertain whine. Now Daniel turned the bag over again in his hands, staring at the faint, discolored patch near the collar. It wasn't much, just a slight residue, invisible unless you knew what to look for. But Echo's reaction hadn't been random. He trusted the dog's instincts more than he trusted most people. And Echo had never been wrong. Daniel hesitated, then made his decision. He slipped on gloves, sealed the evidence in a new envelope, and typed a brief internal memo. Trace analysis. Confirm possible substance exposure. He didn't tell his captain. Didn't tell anyone. Within hours, the sample was sent to the forensics lab, flagged as a routine chemical trace test. No one asked questions. Why would they? Time, OMS. Echo's story had already become legend. No one expected a hero's case to hide anything dark. 2 days later, the report came back. Daniel read it once, then twice. His stomach dropped. Positive trace of chloral hydrate, a controlled sedative, illegal to possess without prescription, often used to induce sleep or unconsciousness. He stared at the words until they blurred. He could feel Echo's presence beside him, quiet and solid. The dog's amber eyes met his, and Daniel felt the unspoken truth settle like lead in his chest. "Damn it," he whispered, voice breaking. "You were right again, weren't you?" Echo tilted his head, watching him closely. Daniel leaned back, exhaling hard. His mind raced, every image from that morning flashing like a storm. Emily's trembling hands, the way she screamed for help, how Echo had fixated on her scent, not the girls, and then the hospital. Echo growling at her handbag. He rubbed his face, exhausted. If this is true, if someone gave that kid chloral hydrate, he couldn't finish the thought. By morning, Daniel made up his mind. He'd start quietly, ask questions. No one would suspect a K-9 medic of playing detective. The next afternoon, Daniel and Echo drove to the Thompson residence, a modest 2-story house on the edge of town. Rain still clung to the air, heavy with the smell of wet earth. Daniel parked by the curb, watching the windows flicker with light inside. Echo sat alert in the passenger seat, nose twitching. "This is just a follow-up," Daniel said softly, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince, the dog or himself. "Routine welfare check, nothing more." But as he stepped out, Echo's low growl vibrated against the silence of the car. "Yeah," Daniel murmured. "That's what I'm afraid of." Emily answered the door, her expression strained but polite. She wore a cardigan too light for the weather, her hair pulled back neatly. Behind her, the faint hum of the TV carried the sound of a talk show host discussing hero stories. "Officer Ross," she said, voice sweet but tight. "I wasn't expecting you." "Just a quick check-in," Daniel replied. "Department protocol after a rescue involving minors. Mind if I come in?" "Of course not." She stepped aside, gesturing him in. "Lily's napping upstairs." Echo entered first, tail low but steady. He sniffed the air, then moved slowly around the living room, nose close to the carpet. Daniel watched from the corner of his eye. "Still can't believe how lucky we were," Emily said as she poured coffee. "Every night I think about that moment. I don't know what I'd do without her." Her words sounded right, but they felt rehearsed. Too smooth. Daniel nodded absently. It was one of those miracles you don't forget. He took a sip of coffee, eyes scanning the room. Framed photos, Lily's toys stacked neatly by the stairs. Everything spotless. Too spotless. "Did the hospital ever tell you what might have caused her breathing to stop?" he asked casually. Emily froze, for half a second. So quick most people wouldn't have noticed. Then she smiled, tight and brittle. "They said maybe shock, or a reaction to something she ate." Daniel nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Good to know." Meanwhile, Echo had wandered toward the hallway, head low, steps deliberate. He sniffed near a small table by the stairs, then sat down suddenly, staring at a drawer. Daniel's pulse quickened. He recognized that signal. Not danger, not alert. but interest. "Echo," he called softly. The dog didn't move. Emily followed his gaze. "He's curious, isn't he?" "Yeah," Daniel said quietly, standing. "Always has a nose for things." She laughed, but it cracked faintly in the middle. He left soon after, polite and professional, though every instinct screamed at him to turn back, open that drawer, and see what Echo had found. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not without evidence. That evening, he drove across town to meet Mark Thompson. Mark lived in a small, rented apartment, a far cry from the warm family home Daniel had just left. The man looked like he hadn't slept in days, eyes sunken, beard untrimmed, hands trembling as he spoke. "I didn't hurt my daughter," Mark said immediately, before Daniel could even sit down. "You have to believe me. Emily's the one who filed that report. She said I left pills out, but I didn't. I swear to God, I didn't." Daniel studied him carefully. There was no aggression in his voice, just grief, raw and unfiltered. He slid a photo across the table, Lily smiling in her hospital bed. "She's recovering well," Daniel said softly. Mark's eyes filled with tears. "Thank God. That's all that matters." "Can I ask," Daniel said slowly, "did your wife ever mention giving Lily medicine? Maybe something to help her sleep?" Mark frowned. "Medicine? No, she's terrified of medication. Wouldn't even give Lily cough syrup without checking the label 10 times. Daniel nodded again. "All right. Thanks for your time." When he stood to leave, Mark's voice stopped him. "Officer Ross, do you think something happened that day? Something we don't know?" Daniel hesitated at the door. "I think," he said quietly, "sometimes the truth hides in plain sight." Outside, the rain had started again, gentle but unrelenting. Echo waited by the car, his eyes glowing faintly under the streetlight. When Daniel opened the door, the dog gave a low huff, as if asking, "Time with 300s. "Well?" Daniel met his gaze. "You were right," he whispered. "Something's wrong here." Echo blinked slowly, a quiet acknowledgement. The truth was out there now, faint as the scent of rain on asphalt, and Echo, patient, relentless, loyal, was already tracking it. The afternoon sun was fading when Daniel pulled into the Thompsons' driveway again. The air was heavy, humid, the kind that pressed against the chest and made each breath feel deliberate. Echo sat upright in the passenger seat, ears sharp, tail still. His eyes locked on the house as though he already knew what waited inside. Daniel exhaled slowly, gripping a small stuffed bear, Lily's favorite toy, the one she'd dropped during the chaos in the park. He told himself this visit was harmless, just a simple return. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just that. This was about answers. He got out, adjusting his badge beneath his jacket. "Stay close, partner," he murmured. Echo hopped down beside him, silent as a shadow. Together they walked up the porch steps. Daniel knocked. Emily opened the door, smiling faintly when she saw the toy in his hand. "Officer Ross," she said softly, "you didn't have to come all this way." "It's no trouble," Daniel replied, forcing a polite smile. "Thought Lily might want this back." Emily's eyes softened. "She'll be thrilled. She's napping upstairs." Daniel nodded. "Good to hear she's doing better." He hesitated before adding, "Mind if I step in for a moment?" "Of course." She stepped aside and he entered. The scent of lavender and cleaning products lingered in the air. Everything looked the same as before, tidy, almost staged. The living room light glowed warm, but the atmosphere felt off, too still. Echo crossed the threshold, and froze. His body stiffened, muscles tight beneath his dark coat. A low sound built in his chest. Not a growl, but the alert tone Daniel knew well. Daniel's pulse ticked faster. He looked down. "What is it, boy?" Echo's gaze fixed on the corner table near the staircase. Without warning, he moved, padding swiftly across the room, nose to the floor. Then he stopped at the small drawer beneath the table and began pawing at it, nails scratching against the wood. Emily's face went pale. What's he doing?" Daniel's voice was calm, but his heartbeat thundered. "He's trained to detect chemicals," he said quietly. "Sometimes he reacts to prescription residue." "There's nothing there," she said quickly, stepping forward. "Please call him off." Echo ignored her, pawing harder now, his body shaking with focus. His tail was stiff, his breathing fast. Daniel knelt beside him. "What's in there, Echo?" He tugged the drawer open. At first, nothing. Just papers, a few receipts, a small box of matches. Then something rolled from the back corner and clinked softly against the wood. A small glass vial. Empty. The label half peeled away. Daniel picked it up carefully, gloved hand steady even as his stomach turned. The faded print read, "Chloral hydrate." The air between them went silent. Emily stepped back, one hand trembling over her mouth. That's not mine," she stammered. "It's Mark's. He must have—" "Mark doesn't live here anymore," Daniel said evenly. "You told me yourself last time." Her lip quivered. "He left some things behind." Daniel met her eyes. "Emily, this vial was hidden." She shook her head violently. "No, I didn't mean for anything to happen." Her voice cracked, rising higher with each word. "He was going to take her, do you understand? He said he'd leave and take Lily with him. I just wanted to scare him. I thought—" "Scare him how?" Daniel asked quietly. Emily's breath hitched. Her hands clenched in her hair. "I didn't want to hurt her. Just a few drops, to make her sleep, to make him think she needed me more. I thought—" She broke off, sobbing, her shoulders shaking. "I thought she'd be fine." Echo growled low, the sound vibrating through the room. Not aggression, but unease, sorrow. Emily fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "She wasn't supposed to stop breathing. I panicked. I called for help. I didn't know what else to do." Daniel's throat tightened. He'd heard confessions before. Rage-filled, cold, remorseless. But this one was different. It was fractured, desperate, bleeding guilt through every syllable. He took a step forward. "Emily." She looked up, eyes wild. "You don't understand. I loved her. I just wanted him to see that she needed me." Her voice wavered between rage and despair. "I'm a good mother. I am." Echo stood beside Daniel, watching her closely. His fur bristled along the neck, the subtle shift of instinct recognizing chaos, not evil. A storm of regret and fear tangled beyond reason. Daniel swallowed hard. "Emily, you need to come with me." She shook her head violently. "No, please. Don't take me away from her, please." "I'm sorry," he said softly, pulling his cuffs from his belt. "You don't have a choice." As he stepped closer, Emily collapsed into sobs, hands trembling. "I just wanted him to suffer, not her." Daniel's hands shook as he clasped the cuffs around her wrists. His voice was low, heavy. "Emily Thompson, you're under arrest for endangerment of a minor and possession of a controlled substance." Her head bowed. "Will she hate me?" Daniel hesitated, his heart breaking in the quiet. "She's alive," he said finally. That's what matters now. Echo whined softly, a sound filled with something achingly human, almost mournful. Daniel looked down at his partner. "You knew," he whispered. "From the start." The dog's eyes lifted, glimmering amber under the dim light. For a moment, time stopped. The officer, the mother, the dog, all bound by a truth that had no victory, no celebration, only the heavy silence that comes after a storm. As backup arrived, Daniel guided Emily toward the door. She didn't resist. Her tears fell soundlessly, dripping onto the wooden floor. Outside, the air had cooled, a faint wind stirring the scent of rain and lilacs. When they reached the car, Daniel paused, looking at the small house behind them. The photos on the walls, the toys scattered on the couch, the life that had looked so normal. He exhaled shakily. "Sometimes, the hardest part of this job," he murmured, "is realizing that love and harm can come from the same place." Echo pressed against his leg gently, grounding him. He turned to the dog, voice soft. "Good work, partner. You found the truth." Echo blinked once, slow, solemn, as though even he took no pride in it. As the patrol car door shut behind Emily, Daniel stood in the driveway, the weight of the world sitting squarely on his shoulders. The neighborhood was quiet again, but the silence didn't bring peace. Echo sat beside him, staring at the fading sky, his ears twitching with the last echo of a mother's cry. A cry not of denial, but of realization. The truth had been found, and it had broken every heart that touched it. The courtroom was overflowing. Reporters, cameras, and curious citizens filled every bench, their whispers blending into a tense hum beneath the high ceiling. The once bright headlines that had called her the brave mother saved by a hero dog now felt like ghosts hovering over the room, hollow echoes of a story that had turned inside out. At the front, Emily Thompson sat between her attorneys, pale and distant. Her hands were folded tightly on the table, knuckles white, the faint tremor of guilt visible in every motion. She wore a plain blouse, no makeup, her hair tied back, a far cry from the tearful interviews that once melted the internet's heart. Across the aisle sat Officer Daniel Ross, uniform crisp, posture straight, though his expression betrayed exhaustion. Beside him, Echo rested quietly, wearing his black K9 vest with the words, "Police Service Dog," stitched in white. He looked calm, almost regal, but Daniel could feel the tension humming through the leash. Echo's ears twitched with every sound. The shuffle of papers, the creak of the judge's chair, the faint sniffles from the gallery. The judge's gavel struck once, silencing the room. Court is now in session for the state versus Emily Thompson. The prosecutor, Ava Monroe, rose, her tone clear and composed. "Your Honor, the state will demonstrate that the defendant, motivated by desperation and control, administered a sedative to her daughter, nearly costing the child her life. We will show that the truth came to light only because of the instincts of Officer Ross and his K9 partner." Emily's lawyer shifted uneasily, but said nothing yet. Daniel glanced toward Emily. For a brief second, her eyes met his. They weren't defiant. They weren't pleading. They were hollow, as if she had already accepted the verdict the moment she confessed. The first evidence presented was the park video, the same clip that had made them famous. The screen flickered to life, showing the sunlit chaos of that morning. People leaned forward, remembering where they were when they first saw it online. Echo darting through the crowd, Daniel kneeling, Emily screaming. When Lily's tiny cry burst through the speakers, the moment of life returning, the audience gasped again, just as they had months ago. A woman in the back began to weep softly. Even the judge's expression softened for a second. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tightening. That sound, Lily's cry, still haunted his dreams. Then the video froze on Echo's image, his nose pressed to the child's chest, eyes fierce with instinct. Prosecutor Monroe stepped closer to the screen. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what the world saw. A miracle. But what the world did not see was what Officer Ross and Echo sensed that day. The lights dimmed slightly as the next slide appeared. Forensic photos. The lab report highlighted on screen. Subsequent testing, Monroe continued, found traces of chloral hydrate on the child's shirt, the same controlled sedative discovered later in the defendant's home. The courtroom collectively inhaled. Murmurs rippled through the benches. Daniel's jaw tightened. He'd known this moment would come, but hearing it aloud, the cold, clinical confirmation of what Echo had smelled, still struck him like a punch. The prosecutor gestured toward Daniel. Officer Ross, please approach the stand. He rose slowly. Echo stayed seated at his heel, obedient and still, eyes locked on his partner. After the oath, Monroe began. Officer Ross, you were the first responder that day? Yes, ma'am. And your K-9 partner Echo, he was trained to detect medical distress, correct? That's right, Daniel said. Echo was cross-trained for search, rescue, and medical response. He alerts to abnormal breathing, pulse, and sometimes chemical odors. Monroe leaned closer. Did Echo alert to something specific on the child? Daniel hesitated. His voice softened. Yes. He gave a cardiac distress signal. But his behavior also indicated recognition of a chemical scent. And when did you realize the significance of that? Later, Daniel admitted. When we found the vial. When the lab confirmed what he'd sensed. The prosecutor turned toward the jury. So, to be clear, it was the dog's instincts that led to uncovering what really happened? Yes, Daniel said. His eyes dropped to Echo. He knew something wasn't right, even before I did. Monroe nodded. No further questions. The defense attorney rose, his tone measured but sharp. Officer Ross, you've been praised across the country for this rescue. Could it be possible that in all the attention and chaos afterward, conclusions were drawn too quickly? Daniel met his gaze evenly. Evidence doesn't draw conclusions, sir. It just tells the truth. The lawyer frowned. And yet, you never saw my client administer any substance to her daughter, did you? No, Daniel said. But I saw what she tried to hide. Silence fell. The defense lawyer looked ready to press further, but Emily placed a trembling hand on his sleeve and whispered something. He paused, then sighed. No further questions. The judge nodded. Officer Ross, you may step down. Daniel returned to his seat, hand resting gently on Echo's back. The dog leaned subtly against his leg, a silent reminder that they were still a team, no matter how heavy the truth became. Then, Emily rose. Her lawyer gave her a small nod, though his eyes were weary. Your Honor, my client wishes to make a statement. The room hushed. Emily faced the judge, her voice trembling at first, but clear enough to reach every corner of the courtroom. I never meant to hurt my daughter, she began. I thought if she got sick, just for a little while, Mark would have to stay. He wouldn't leave us. Her voice broke, but she stopped breathing. I didn't know what to do, and then that dog saved her. He saved her. She turned her eyes toward Echo, tears streaming freely now. He looked at me like he knew, like he saw what I'd done before I even admitted it to myself. Daniel's heart clenched. He wanted to look away, but couldn't. I deserve whatever happens, Emily said, voice cracking. But please, tell her I loved her, even if I broke everything in trying to keep her. The judge sat in silence for a long moment, before nodding solemnly. The court will recess for sentencing. The gavel struck once, a sharp sound that seemed to echo endlessly. As the bailiff led Emily away, Echo stood, tail low, watching her go. There was no aggression in him, no triumph, only a strange, deep sadness. Daniel reached down, resting his hand on the dog's neck. "We did what we had to, partner," he whispered. Echo turned his head slightly, eyes following Emily until the door closed behind her. Around them, people began to stand, reporters whispering, pens scratching. But Daniel stayed seated. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt the weight of every choice, every bark, every second of that day when one act of love had crossed the line into tragedy. Justice had spoken. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like mourning. For a mother. For a child. And for the innocence the truth could never give back. The courthouse emptied slowly, the echoes of voices fading into the late afternoon rain. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of weather that seemed to fit the heaviness in Daniel Ross's chest. Reporters lingered by the steps, their umbrellas clustered like black flowers, cameras still trained on the doors as though waiting for another headline to bloom. Daniel exited quietly, keeping his gaze down. Echo walked beside him, K9 vest dampened by drizzle, his pace steady but subdued. The rain beaded on his fur, running in small rivulets down his muzzle. Just as Daniel reached the bottom of the steps, a voice called from behind. "Officer Ross?" He turned. Mark Thompson stood there, Lily's father, a man who looked older than his years, grief carved deep into the lines of his face. His clothes hung loosely, his hands trembling slightly as he held an umbrella overhead. Daniel hesitated, then nodded politely. "Mr. Thompson." Mark stepped closer, his eyes filled with something Daniel hadn't seen in him before. Peace. Fragile, but real. "I wanted to thank you," he said, voice rough, "for saving my daughter, and for clearing my name." Daniel shifted, uneasy. "I just followed procedure. It was Echo who No," Mark interrupted, shaking his head. "You listened. You could have ignored it, kept the easy story, the hero mother, the miracle. But you didn't. You chose the truth." The rain whispered between them, steady and cold. Mark swallowed, emotion thickening his voice. "I keep thinking about how close I came to losing her, and I keep wondering, what kind of pain drives someone to do what Emily did?" "I can't hate her," he said softly. "God knows I've tried. But she loved that little girl. Twisted love, maybe, but love all the same." Daniel didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, eyes fixed on the wet pavement. "I'm not sure anyone wins here," he said finally. Mark nodded. "No, but maybe that's not the point." He glanced down at Echo, who stood silently at Daniel's side, eyes calm and watchful. "That dog, he's something else. He saw what no one else did." Daniel's voice softened. "He always does." Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. "This was taken yesterday at the hospital," he said, handing it over. "Lily asked me to give it to you." Daniel unfolded it carefully. The photo showed Lily in her hospital bed, smiling weakly, her small hand clutching a crayon drawing, a big brown dog beside a man in a blue uniform. Above it, written in uneven letters, were the words, "Thank you, Echo and Officer Dan." For the first time that day, Daniel smiled, not wide, but enough to ease the tension in his chest. "Tell her we said thank you," he murmured. Mark nodded, then turned to leave. He paused once more at the bottom of the steps. "You know," he said quietly, The world called you heroes because you saved her life. But what you really did was save the truth. Then he walked away, disappearing into the rain. That night, the city was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm. Not peace exactly, but exhaustion. Daniel sat on the porch of his small house, the wooden steps glistening with rain. He had changed out of his uniform, now in a worn gray t-shirt and jeans, sleeves rolled to his elbows. In one hand, a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. In the other, the photo Lily had drawn. Echo sat beside him, unmoving, staring out into the darkness. The rain had softened to a drizzle, tapping gently against the roof. Occasionally, a distant car passed, headlights briefly illuminating the yard before fading into silence again. For a long while, neither man nor dog spoke, though in their kind of silence, speaking wasn't needed. Finally, Daniel broke the stillness. His voice was low, carried away easily by the rain. "You always knew, didn't you?" Echo turned his head slightly, eyes glimmering in the dim porch light. Daniel smiled faintly, shaking his head. "You knew in the park. You knew in the hospital. Hell, you probably knew before I did. And I didn't want to see it." He rubbed a hand over his face, weary. "I wanted the story to end where everyone cheered. I wanted it to be clean, simple, a miracle, but the truth never is." Echo gave a small sigh, resting his head on Daniel's boot, a gesture of quiet understanding. Daniel looked down at him, voice breaking slightly. "Do you ever wish we didn't have to see the worst in people, partner? That maybe just once we could leave a scene believing everything's as good as it looks?" Echo didn't move. The rain pattered softly, a rhythm that seemed to answer in its own way. No, this was their purpose, to see, even when it hurt. Daniel leaned back against the post, letting the rain mist against his face. "You know," he said softly, "they'll write stories about this one. They'll say we were heroes again. They won't see the cost. They'll never see Emily in that chair, or the way Mark still looks for the woman he used to love in the person she became." He exhaled. "They'll just see a dog who saved a little girl." Echo lifted his head at that. Proud, but humble all the same. Daniel chuckled softly. "And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what the world needs to believe." He set the coffee down beside him, the steam long gone, and rubbed Echo's neck. The dog leaned into his touch. "Still," Daniel said quietly, "I think about her, you know. Emily. What she must have felt, watching her family slip away, thinking one desperate act could fix it all. That kind of love. It's dangerous. It blinds people." The porch light flickered once, then steadied. "You can't build love on fear," he whispered. "It always breaks." Echo shifted closer, pressing his shoulder gently against Daniel's leg, solid, grounding, the quiet reassurance of a creature who lived only in truth, not human contradiction. The rain deepened again, soft sheets cascading off the roof. Daniel closed his eyes and listened. The rhythm steady, endless, the sound of time washing over everything. Somewhere inside, the phone buzzed. Another reporter, another interview request. He ignored it. Out here, there was only the rain, the photo still in his hand, and the dog who never failed to see what others missed. He whispered again, more to himself this time. "You always knew." Echo's ears twitched. His tail brushed against the porch once, twice, slow, gentle, and Daniel finally let himself breathe. Because justice wasn't about punishment. It wasn't even about truth. It was about the quiet moments afterward. when you could finally look at what was broken and still find a way to forgive it. The rain continued to fall, steady and cleansing. Echo lifted his head toward it, eyes soft, as if sensing something beyond the night. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't feel like the world's weight was on his shoulders. He felt human again. Spring returned, soft and golden, the kind of morning that looked almost identical to the one that had changed everything. Riverside Park, once the stage of panic and salvation, now brimmed again with laughter, music, and sunlight. But this time the crowd wasn't running in fear. They were gathered to celebrate. A large banner hung between two trees near the podium. City Medal of Valor Ceremony, honoring Officer Daniel Ross and K9 Echo. Daniel adjusted the collar of his formal uniform, the dark blue pressed crisp against his shoulders. He hated ceremonies, the spotlight, the noise, but today was different. Today wasn't about him. Beside him sat Echo, wearing a freshly polished vest with a silver insignia that gleamed whenever the light hit it just right. The crowd adored him. Children waved handmade signs. People clapped and called his name. For once, the applause didn't feel empty. On the front row sat Lily Thompson, between her father, Mark, and a smiling nurse from St. Mary's Hospital. She looked radiant, cheeks rosy, curls tied back with a pink ribbon. When her name was mentioned, she waved shyly. Daniel caught her gaze and smiled. Echo's tail thumped once against the stage floor. The mayor stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered to honor not just an act of bravery, but an act of instinct, compassion, and truth. Officer Ross and Echo remind us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it barks. Laughter rippled through the crowd, light and genuine. The mayor continued. When a child's life hung in the balance, they acted without hesitation. And when a deeper truth surfaced, one that tested our faith, they followed it with integrity. That is the heart of service. The applause swelled, a wave of sound that seemed to vibrate through the air. Echo stood proudly beside Daniel's. They walked up the steps. The medal, a silver star edged with blue, glimmered as the mayor pinned it onto Echo's vest. The cameras flashed. Cheers erupted. Echo, our city's bravest, the mayor said warmly. And Officer Ross, the man who trusted his partner, even when the truth was hard to face. Daniel gave a small nod. Thank you, sir. But when the applause faded and the speeches ended, Daniel's thoughts drifted elsewhere. Not to victory, not to the spotlight, but to the woman who wasn't there. Later that afternoon, after the ceremony ended and the park began to empty, Daniel sat on a bench beneath the same oak tree where the rescue had happened. The grass had grown back, soft and green again. The crowd's noise faded into the distance, replaced by the gentle hum of wind and laughter from passing children. Echo lay beside him, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed. The medal still hung on his vest, catching the sun. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter. The paper creased, worn at the edges. It had arrived only a week earlier from Greenville Correctional Facility. The handwriting was careful, slanted, the ink slightly smudged from what looked like tears. He unfolded it slowly. Dear Officer Ross, I don't expect forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. But please tell Echo I'm sorry. He saved more than a life that day. He saved my soul. Every night, I close my eyes and see him, not with anger, but with knowing. He saw through me. I didn't deserve it, but he gave me the chance to face what I had become. I think that's what redemption really is. Not being free, but being seen. Tell my daughter that I love her, And tell Echo that when she's old enough to understand, I'll thank him myself, even if it's from behind glass. Emily Thompson. Daniel stared at the page for a long time before speaking. His voice came out barely above a whisper. You hear that, buddy? She's talking to you. Echo lifted his head slightly, amber eyes meeting Daniel's. She says you saved her soul. Daniel's voice trembled as he laughed under his breath. Guess that makes you a therapist now, huh? Echo blinked once, as if understanding, then rested his head gently on Daniel's knee. The movement was small, but it carried weight, silent empathy that could dissolve grief without words. Daniel felt his throat tighten. You know, I keep thinking about what she said, about being seen. Maybe that's what you do best, huh? You see people, even when they're hiding from themselves. He looked out across the park, where Lily ran through the grass, laughing as Mark chased her with a paper airplane. The sound carried through the air like a song. Look at her, Daniel whispered. She's happy again. Whole. Echo's tail brushed softly against his leg. Maybe that's enough, Daniel said. Maybe forgiveness isn't about saying it's okay. Maybe it's just about letting the pain rest where it belongs. In the past. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into his pocket. Then he looked at Echo, smiling faintly through the blur in his eyes. You did good, partner. Better than any of us. The dog's ears twitched. He shifted closer, leaning the weight of his head against Daniel's chest. Warm, solid, grounding. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the rhythm of Echo's breath sync with his own. Around them, the world moved on. Parents calling to their kids, joggers passing by. The faint echo of laughter carried on the breeze. The city would remember Echo as a hero. But Daniel knew him as something deeper, a compass that pointed to truth, no matter how hard it was to follow. He reached down and scratched behind Echo's ear. You know, he murmured, they'll probably put your face on another news story tomorrow. Echo, the dog who saved the city's faith in humanity. How's that sound? Echo gave a low huff, tail swishing lazily, unimpressed. Daniel chuckled. Yeah, I thought so. You never cared about medals anyway. He looked up at the sky. The clouds had begun to part, sunlight pouring through in wide golden beams. It illuminated the metal on Echo's vest until it shimmered like fire. Funny, Daniel said quietly, how the same park can hold so much. Fear, hope, forgiveness. It's all still here, just in different forms. Echo stood then, stretching, before nudging Daniel's hand with his nose. All right, Daniel said, smiling. One last walk for the hero, huh? They stood together, man and dog, walking slowly along the familiar path where everything had once gone wrong, and where somehow everything had been made right again. The laughter of a child echoed behind them, Lily's voice bright and full of life. Daniel turned slightly, watching her chase her father across the field. The sight drew a quiet tear to his eye. He whispered, mostly to himself, That's your real medal, partner. Right there. Echo glanced up at him, eyes soft, and wagged his tail once. A quiet acknowledgement. An echo of everything words could never say. The city was wrapped in the soft gray of dawn when Officer Daniel Ross fastened Echo's harness. Riverside Park, once chaos, then redemption, now lay calm beneath the rising sun. Ready for another day, partner? He asked. Echo gave a low, steady bark. Quiet certainty. They walked the familiar path, boots and paws side by side, through a place that had healed. Joggers waved, whispering, That's the hero dog. Daniel nodded, eyes forward. He wasn't walking through memory anymore. He was walking through peace. They paused beneath the old oak tree. The ground where Emily had knelt, where Lily had gone still, was now covered in tall green grass. "Hard to believe it's been almost a year," Daniel murmured. Echo sat beside him, listening to the wind, as if hearing a memory. "You weren't just saving her," Daniel said softly. "You were guiding me, teaching me what it means to see people." Echo met his gaze, deep, wordless understanding passing between them. The park filled with laughter and light. Children arrived, among them Lily, her pink ribbon fluttering. "Officer Dan! Echo!" she called, running to hug the dog. Echo stood still, tail thumping gently. "Daddy says you're still working," she said. "Every day," Daniel smiled. "Somebody's got to keep this park safe." She giggled, calling him the best dog in the world. Mark approached, nodding. "Being here helps her," he said quietly, facing it without fear. Daniel looked at Lily, carefree, whole, and nodded. "Yeah," he said softly. "It helps us all." After they said goodbye, Daniel and Echo continued toward the river. The water shimmered, calm and endless. "Everything changes," Daniel said, "but somehow, you always stay the same." The radio crackled, calling them back to duty, but he lingered, taking in the ordinary beauty of the morning. Then Echo paused, nose lifted to the breeze. Daniel froze beside him, waiting. After a moment, the dog relaxed. Whatever he'd sensed wasn't danger. It was something familiar. "You remembering again?" Daniel asked with a smile. Echo blinked, turning toward the sunrise. The golden light filled his eyes. Calm, wise, eternal. Daniel watched him, voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes the truest instincts don't just save lives. They reveal what makes us human. The camera would linger, on Echo's steady gaze, the soft rise of his chest, the peace they'd earned. Then sunlight would dissolve the scene into a new day. Echo's silhouette would remain for a breath longer, timeless, unwavering, before fading into the golden horizon. Because heroes don't disappear. They live on, in every life they've touched, and every truth they've uncovered. You know, stories like this remind us why we love dogs so deeply. Not just because they protect us, but because they understand us. A German Shepherd's loyalty isn't something you can train into them. It's something they choose to give. Echo didn't just save a life. He reminded us what it means to care, to notice, to love without expecting anything back. If you've ever looked into your own dog's eyes and felt that quiet understanding, that unspoken bond, then you already know what I mean. And if you'd like to learn simple, gentle ways to strengthen that connection, there's a resource I've found truly meaningful. I'll leave the link below. Take a look when your heart feels ready. At the end of the day, maybe that's what all of this is about. Giving our dogs the same love they so freely give us. Because sometimes they're not just our pets, they're the truest reflection of who we are when we're at our best.